Okay, so here comes to the second part of the chapter about major fluvial process, part B. So first of all, you could watch this video on page 22 to know more about the effects of the river flow on fluvial processes like the erosion, transportation, and the deposition. So when doing this experiment, you could see that the video change the volume of the water flow to show how the variation in the amount of the water would result in different fluvial processes. For example, when we give a smaller amount of the water flow, some sand grains, especially the larger ones, will first deposit. And this could demonstrate the effects of the changing river energy on the fluvial processes. Okay, so on page 23, it tells you that how does the river could erode the land. So how does the water erode the land? Actually, the running water, they are very powerful. They could remove the rocks and other mineral particles. So this is what we call the fluvial erosion. Okay, 侵蝕啦，河流嘅侵蝕啦。So the agent of the erosion of the fluvial erosion is the running water and the load carried by the river. So there are majorly three fluvial erosion: the headward erosion, the vertical erosion, or what we call the down cutting, and the lateral erosion. So put a star on this table on page 23. So headward erosion, it means at the source of the water, the erosion will mix downcutting and steepens the slope at the back of the river source here 喺後面嘅 and it will extend the river source backward, lengthening the river channel. For the vertical erosion or the downcutting, it usually occurs at the upper course. Remove the rock from the back, okay, deepening the river channel. For the lateral erosion, usually found in the middle and the lower course, it removes along the river bank at the two sides. That's why it can widen the river channel and the river valley. That's why in the middle and lower course, you could find that the river channel, they are usually quite wide. And there are four types of the fluvial erosion as well. Okay, first of all is known as the solution or correlation. So it means that the minerals, they are soluble and they will dissolve away. Okay, 消失咗嘅. This will weaken the rocks and makes the rocks easily being broken. And this is one of the main processes in the vertical erosion. It causes the abrasion. You could see the load they rubs against the river bank or the river back, making the channel back to be less uneven. 即係佢哋會磨平嗰個嘅river bank 或者 river backs 啦。And for the attrition here, you could see the rocks in the loads, they are colliding with each other and breaks. So the load may be smoother and more rounded. So you might find the attrition and abrasion are quite similar. So you could visit this website for more deepened differences between the two. But in short, attrition is like more rounded. You can erode this load entirely, making it all rounded, all angle rounded. But for the abrasion, okay, it might only affect one of this face. And for the hydraulic action means 水力作用啦. It happens, okay, when there are some cracks on the river bank. So the water is pushed into this river bank okay, the cracks in the bank, and then the air is compressed inside, so the pressure will be created and break the rock. So repeated action will make these cracks being larger, and the rocks you could see, therefore they are loosened and maybe it will be moved. The river bank here will finally collapse if the hydraulic action is very strong and repeated. Okay, on page 24 to page 25, you could also find out that the factors affecting the rate of the fluvial erosion. So let's see. The erosive power, the type of rock, and the human activities could affect how fast the river being eroded. So let's see about the erosive power first. It could be determined by the characteristics of the load. More of the load, heavier, more angular, will make greater potential for the erosion. So if the river got more energy, that is faster speed and more water and steeper slope, it would cause faster speed of the erosion because the energy is greater. For the water quality, acidic water with flavor solution, because the acid could many minerals, they are soluble when they meet the acid. Next is the type of the rock. As we learned in the chapter 8, you know that if the rock with more cracks and more soluble minerals, they would be erode more easily. And for us, the human activities, first of all, the deforestation, it would make the vegetation to be less, so thus more overland flowed, and more rock and stones will be washed into the river, so there would be more tools for erosion. For the urbanization, because we will cover the road with the cement, so it will be more smooth and reduce the infiltration because the cement will stop the water from entering the soil level. So the river discharge will increase and thus the river energy. For cutting the slope, it will make the overland flow to be increased and more channel water and more energy will create it. If we have a lot of industrial or farming or other activities that may create some sewage or chemicals, they will increase the acidity of the river, and which flavors the solution of some of the minerals, and this all will increase the rate of the fluvial erosion. Okay, so after we knowing about the factors affecting the rate of the fluvial erosion, now we will learn how does the river carry its load down from upper course to the lower course. So talking about the loads, there are three types of river loads. First is the dissolved load, 溶解質. Next is the suspended load, 懸疑質. And last is the bed load, 推移質. So the downward movement of these three types of the load is called transportation. So let's see each types, how does different load will be moved downstream. On page 25, you could see some loads, they're kind of flying on the river, right? So they are very fine and very light without touching the riverbed. This is what we call the suspension. 懸疑啦. And some of the larger and heavy boulders, they will roll and drag along, drag along the riverbed. So these are what we call the traction. So these are the bed load. While some smaller stone and pebbles, they will bounce along the river. 佢哋會彈咁樣跳落去啦。And this is what we call the sortation. And finally, some soluble minerals, they might be dissolved and carried downstream. So this is what we call solution. So from here you could see from suspension they are suspended load, the traction and sortation they are the bed load, while for the solution it will create a dissolved load. Okay, so when transporting the load, there are the fluvial transportation. So what could affect the fluvial transportation? Of course, the energy of the river, because larger energy could carry more, greater amount of the heavier load. And the size of the load, if it increase, the river will need more energy to move the load. So these two are the factors affecting the fluvial transportation. For the supply of the load, on page 26 as well, you could see if the fluvial erosion is more and the resistance of the rock is less, there will be a lot of eroded materials. And in a hot wet climate like in Hong Kong, it will be easily weathered. The rocks will be easily weathered. And if there's a steep gradient, there will be more runoff and making more load, wash them to the river. And if there's no vegetation, absence of the vegetation, the surface will be bare and more soil erosion will be happened. And if there's no lake, less tools would be used for trapping the sediments. So all this will create more load to the river. So this one I will skip quickly because you learned deposition in chapter 8. So basically, when the energy is not great enough to move the load, it will be deposited on the riverbed as the sediment. So this is what we call the fluvial deposition. And of course, when the channel water reduce or the speed of the water reduce, it means the river energy reduce. So it would cause deposition. So you could see in the dry season where the water supply decrease, and when the water is leaving the basin at the river mouth, so explain it this way. When the amount of channel water will decrease when the water supply decrease, of course in dry season, or when the more water is leaving the basin, because the river in the arid area will dry up due to a very high evaporation rate, so it would reduce the amount of the channel water. So for the speed of the water, so when it entered the large body of the water, for example, and at the river mouth, or when channel friction is increased, such as when the river enters a channel with a longer water perimeter, or the amount of load is increased, of course it will slow down the river, or the gradient decrease, gentle from the steep slope to a gentle plane, it will reduce the speed of the river flow. So when these two reduce, the energy of the river will reduce, and that's where the deposition will happen. And you could also take a look on this experiment. This experiment telling you that the largest and the heaviest sediment will deposit first. Just like what we mentioned in chapter 8, you can see the pebble and sand heaviest load, will deposit first, and then the silt, the clay, and lastly, the silt and lastly the clay, which is the lightest and finest, will deposit furthest away from the river mouth. This is what we call sorting. So one thing you need to pay attention is that the deposition does not only occur at the mouth of the river. It will also happen in anywhere as long as the river energy drops. For example, here, the inner banks of the curved river channel. Here is where the energy reduces, so the sediments could deposit here. So because the energy change when the river flows from upper course to the lower course, the fluvial process will also change as well. So on page 28 to 29, there is a summary table, so you could read it in detail. I will just quickly go through some main points for you, but you should read it in detail by yourself. For the upper course, you could see here the water is less here, and very rough riverbank and riverbacks, and they are angular shape for the rock fragments. All this will lead to a large channel friction and thus a very low speed of the river flow, and cause small discharge and little river energy. So for the fluvial process, that is erosion, transportation, and deposition. For this one, vertical erosion is the main, and lateral erosion might be less, and heavier headward erosion, you could find it at the source of the river. For transportation, there are little energy and little discharge, so the large fragments may not be able to be moved. And during the rainstorm, when the discharge increase, they might be able to transport some large rock fragment by traction and sortation. For deposition, because there are not much energy here when moving the heavy boulders, so may happen in there may be some deposition here. And if there is suddenly decrease of the river energy, for instance in some shallow pools, or after the rainstorm, the discharge will be decreased. 因為落完雨之後呢，就少咗雨水啦， so the river may stop transporting some large fragments, and deposition happens. For the middle course, the energy here you could see, because there are more channel water, smoother riverbed, and smaller size of the rocks, so it will lead to larger discharge and also greater energy. And the erosion here, because of the reduction in the gradient, so lateral erosion might be more important, and thus the river channel become wider and starts to bend. Active lateral erosion will occur at the outer bank of the river, and major type of the erosion here would be abrasion. So why would it appear at the outer bank of the river? We will talk more about it in the next chapter. So there would be continuous attrition, and thus the size of the load will be decreased. For the transportation, in the middle course, transportation is the main process. The large load will be transported by traction and sortation, and more load is transported by suspension, because some of the loads, they are eroded during the transportation, so they may become smaller. And for the deposition, it happens after the flooding at the inner bank of the river. Inner bank. For the lower course, you could see here got the greatest amount of the channel water and smooth channel bed and banks. Of course, you could see the rock fabrics are very fine and smooth and rounded. So that's why there is a very small channel friction and thus high speed of the river flow and high discharge and great river energy in a lower course. For the fluvial process here, for erosion is not that significant here, but you could find a lateral erosion at the outer bank of the river. Little vertical erosion because it is very gentle and no potential energy could be found. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the lode size is very small due to a continuous abrasion and attrition from all the way downstream. So the lode, they will become very, very small in the lower course of the river. Transportation is still important, and most of the lode is transported by the suspension due to the small size. Deposition is very significant here because especially at the mouth of the river and the inner bank of the river, because during the dry season or on the valley floor during the flooding, you could find deposition here. Maybe because the it would be easier for the energy to drop at the mouth and the inner banks of the river here. So the characteristics of the river could change downwards, and you could see on your book page 30 the amount of the water, the speed, the river energy, the channel width and depth, and also the amount of flow will increase when it going downward. The size of the lode, the channel bed roughness, and the gradient and elevation will decrease. 即係呢前面呢啲紅色嘅呢，就會隨住嗰個高度啦，即係 sorry 唔係高度啦，隨住越下游呢就會越多。咁然後最尾呢三樣呢，越去向下游嘅位置呢，就會越少啦。So please finish the checkpoint, and I have a reminder for you for question 6. You could read the essay guide on page 32 and complete it on page 33. And for the reminder for the essay, you could turn your book to page 31, and question 6 asks you to compare the characteristics of the river channels at the upper and lower course. Only upper and lower course. So here the question asks you to compare, so that means you need to both mention the similarities and the differences. And when you are comparing the similarity and the differences, remember you need to compare each character of upper course and lower course in one paragraph. For example, when you are mentioning the amount of the channel water, you need to say, upper course the channel water is blah blah blah, in the lower course the channel water is blah blah blah. So do not write all the characteristics of the upper course first and then followed by the lower course. 即係好似之前提過大家啦。首先呢，你要揀咗一個準則，譬如話水嘅量啦，咁upper course 係點，lower course 係點，咁你就千祈唔好，千祈不要先寫晒所有 upper course 嘅特徵，再寫晒所有 lower course 嘅特徵，唔好分開去做啊！比較一定係要同一個準則講上流係點，下游係點。係啦，咁呢一個 chapter 嘅內容就大致上講到呢度啦。咁跟住呢，我就會你下一個 video 呢就會見到我就解釋翻呢呢一條 short essay 呢嘅做法係點樣嘅。咁我到時都會再提多次啦，點樣去做 compare 呢一種嘅題型啦。Thank you。